We encourage you to participate in today's webinar by submitting any questions that you have throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature located in your toolbar. Now, please welcome Betty Florimond.
Thank you, Todd, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on what a Biden-Harris administration means for HBCUs. My name is Betty Florimond, Chair of Deloitte's Center for Higher Education Excellence, dedicated to the analysis and research of higher ed's most complex challenges. Recently, we published a report on the hybrid campus, exploring three major shifts for the post-COVID university and how institutions can combine both a physical space and online or tech-enabled education to become more resilient for future disruptions. The center also plays a critical role in convening the higher ed community on topics like the one we'll explore here today. Through client service, our HBCU Emerging Leaders Scholarship Program, our University Relations Group, our Deloitte Foundation's Matching Gifts Program, and student, faculty, and PhD programs, it's truly been our privilege to serve this prestigious HBC community over the years. Last month, in conjunction with the White House, Deloitte hosted the third annual HBCU President's Forum using a think tank lab format. And we just explored barriers and challenges that HBCUs face obtaining government contracts, cooperative agreements, and grants, and strategies to overcome those barriers. That resulted in a set of recommendations we'll share with the White House and continue to shape in our greenhouse labs. And now, it is my honor to introduce our moderator for this afternoon, Dr. Michael Lomax. Since 2004, Dr. Lomax has served as president and CEO of UNCF, the nation's largest provider of scholarships and other educational support to African American students, and a leading advocate for college readiness. Under his leadership, UNCF has raised more than $3 billion and helped more than 110,000 students earn college degrees and launch careers. Annually, UNCF's work enables 60,000 students to go to college with UNCF scholarships and attend its 37-member historically Black college and universities. If you haven't read his latest piece in The Atlantic on how to launch the next era, the next great era of Black prosperity, do yourself a favor. Michael, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Betty. It's wonderful to be here. And thanks to Deloitte for convening what I think is going to be a really, really important conversation for HBCUs. I'm so excited to be moderating a panel with these incredible individuals. I'm going to introduce them by name, but I'm not going to read their bios. You need to do that yourself. They're listed here, and you'll learn so much about the incredible work that they're doing. We're joined today by Dr. Danette Howard of the Lumina Foundation, Dr. Charlotte Morris, who is the interim president of Tuskegee University, and Chancellor Dr. Harold L. Martin of North Carolina A&T. I think we all know them well, and we're going to hear a lot from them today. You know, from 2016 to 2020, HBCUs have navigated divided government in Washington, D.C. Republicans held the White House and the Senate, Democrats held the House. In spite of that, UNCF and HBCUs drove an aggressive agenda that produced startling results. Let's just go through a couple of those. In 2018, loan deferment for 15 HBCUs, freeing up millions of dollars in working capital. In 2019, the passage of the Futures Act, providing $250 million annually in STEM education funding for HBCUs and minority serving institutions. In March of 2020, $1.05 billion set aside, a $1.05 billion set aside in the first stimulus act for HBCUs and minority serving institutions. And then in December of 2020, in the second stimulus funding bill, $1.7 billion set aside for HBCUs and MSIs. And then in December of 2020, just as the old administration was on its way out and the new administration was on its way in, a new budget is adopted with $1.3 billion in debt forgiveness for all current HBCU borrowers within the HBCU Capital Finance Program. So before we speak about HBCU expectations and what the Biden-Harris administration can mean for HBCUs, let's just get grounded in what the last 4 years of hard work have meant for these institutions. And I want to begin with you, Dr. Morris, and ask you quite directly what I'm sure a lot of other people have asked you: what has $100 million in debt forgiveness meant for Tuskegee, and what will it mean for the future?
Thank you for that question. Funding for Tuskegee has meant definitely, and for all other institutions, that our bottom line on our balance sheet look very much, very good now. And it also means, though, that we don't have the debt fees and interest rates that are attached to our budget for the next year. So that means a lot for Tuskegee, to the tune of almost $11 million. So that means that our bottom line, again, is much greater. We have not been able to actually act on that yet because, as you know, the funding cycle has not begun because we have to wait on our paperwork to get in before we can advertise extensively. But we are excited about what we are going to do. And the first thing we're talking about is, as a private institution with beforehand limited resources, we are talking about dormitories that are, we have dormitories that Booker T. Washington helped to build. And so we are talking about an upscale living learning center so that our students will be able to collaborate and be able to work with each other for innovative projects where otherwise they would not have been able to do. And that's the top of our list. But of course, there are other things, because we know that in today's society, when we're talking about preparing students for the workplace, students need now to be diverse in their preparations. You can't just major in one thing. You have to be prepared for a number of disciplines in order to function in a global society. And so we're talking about world-class faculty members who can assist our students in moving in that direction. And we're going to revisit, because this is a year that we will be redoing our strategic plan. So we're going to look at our mission and look at our values and our goals and determine what we need to do there in order to continue to prepare these students for the global market. And in that vein, we are moving toward world-class faculty staff, world-class students, world-class graduates, and just an overall improved environment at our institution in terms of what we are able to provide and prepare for the future.
So you really are, this is giving you capital to reinvest in your priorities $11 million in annual debt service is an incredible drain on any institution. Now, Dr. Martin, I want to ask you that same question, but a little differently. I don't think you had debt relief, but I know that you got a significant amount of additional funding through the set-asides in the two CARES Acts. Can you tell us what that amount was and what that is going to mean at North Carolina A&T?
Thanks very much, Dr. Lomax, and great question. And I'd certainly like to say a special thanks to Deloitte for creating this great opportunity with this remarkable panel. I'm delighted to be a part of the group. The investments through the CARES Act, and the strategic support for higher education in general, and certainly historically Black colleges and universities, have been transformative. They really have for all institutions. And in particular, our institution, the first CARES Act created for our university $54 million of investment that are defined to support student assistance, student aid, to stay in school and meet the growing demands for our students for housing and subsistence, as well as daycare and all the other related kinds of expenses that many of our students are required to pay particular attention to during this very significant time of the pandemic. But we've also been able to use these funds as investments in enhancing technology and making technology more robust, as well as investing in those students in our community who come from rural America, who come from communities where technology is not available through the internet and other services. We've been able to provide for our students a significant level of infrastructure support and tutorial support to enhance their abilities to continue to gain access to classes, stay in school, and continue to be successful, which has been critically important. We've also used these resources as investments in our faculty in enhancing their skills in teaching online so that we're able to ensure that we'll continue to provide our students with a very robust, very supportive, and engaging, successful educational experience during this pandemic as well. So we have been very smart about how these funds have been invested across our university in the areas that are critically important. And then, of course, as most universities in America who have been able to remain open as we have been to provide face-to-face as well as hybrid instruction for our students, we've also realized that we've had a revenue shortfall in housing, dining, athletics, et cetera. And for our university, we've used these funds very strategically to mitigate these revenue shortfalls and the debt we may have incurred as a way of enhancing and balancing our resources for our university and creating a competitive balance sheet so that when we come out of this pandemic, we will be in a very strong financial posture as we look to the future as well.
So just to put a finer point with both of you, if you were to think back to March of 2020 and the state of North Carolina A&T and Tuskegee University, as you entered into this, unknown of COVID, and now we're not out of it, but it's a year later, how would you assess the condition of your institution? Are you weaker than you were in March of 2020? Or are you in some ways perhaps stronger? Dr. Morris?
I would say we are much stronger than we were at the beginning of March last year, because the funds that were allocated for COVID, we were able to use for a number of things, like Dr. Martin had indicated, technology infrastructure, because we had to go from a face-to-face learning environment to a virtual learning environment. So half of our technology was not there in order to facilitate that. So the resources helped us to upgrade and be able to do that. And also our, as I indicated, we are working on our strategic plan for the next 5 years. So for once, well, since I've been there anyway for 35 years, for once we are able to do a strategic plan, attaching budget numbers to it, and then also doing our master plan all together into one particular document. And that's monumental for us. So we have been able to do a lot.
What about you, Dr. Martin?
similar to Tuskegee University and in Dr. Morris's comments, we really are in a stronger financial posture today because of the infusion of the CARES Act funds. But we experienced an enrollment growth this year, despite the pandemic. Applications for admission are stronger for fall 2021 than they were the previous year. And so the ability to demonstrate a strong financial posture, but also a strong posture of managing universities' operations during this critical pandemic and keeping our students and our faculty and staff safe, but continuing to, within operational shifts and strategy, we've been able to demonstrate our abilities to provide a quality educational experience today, even in the midst of the pandemic, keeping our students safe. Our students want to be on our campus. They want to be in our communities. And we've been able to provide for them significant provisions to be able to do so, as well as access to technology, support teams. And part of what we've seen across higher education in general is that many students across all campuses have struggled with mental illness, mental health challenges and the like. And we've been able to provide for our students additional professional staffing and online services in very different modes of operation that allowed us to be continually innovative and support our students as well as our faculty and our staff. So we're excited about our posture today. We're very appreciative of the investments that have been made through these federal support funds for our universities. But it's also causing us to think very differently about how we will manage operations post-pandemic, because we've learned so much, we've been much more innovative, and we've infused technology and different strategies for how we will operate our university, not only during the pandemic, but as we look to the future as well.
Wow. So Dr. Danette Howard, I mean, this wasn't exactly the answers. These weren't exactly the answers I was expecting. From your vantage point at Lumina Foundation, and if you could just tell us a little bit about how Lumina approaches the issues of higher education and HBCUs and minority serving institutions, how would you assess the condition and position of HBCUs in 2021 relative to the rest of higher ed?
Yeah, thank you for that question and for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. So at Lumina Foundation, we have one singular focus, which is to increase learning beyond high school and to ensure that more individuals have those high quality credentials, including, of course, bachelor's degrees that we know are necessary to thrive in today's economy. And in looking overall at the numbers, we also look at specific communities by race and ethnicity, by income population. And our work is designed to ensure that individuals who have historically been underrepresented, quite frankly, in our completion and graduation cohorts are actually thriving and completing and earning those credentials. So Dr. Lomax, as we think about our work, we see HBCUs as central to that work. We often get the question, are HBCUs still relevant? Well, when have they not been relevant? And I believe that they are more relevant today, perhaps than at most other times in our history. And so what I love about the responses of our two university presidents is that they exemplify that our institutions aren't just existing, but they are thriving at a time when many are actually struggling to even keep the doors open. So Dr. Martin, I appreciate your signaling that at North Carolina A&T, enrollment numbers are up and applications for the next cycle are up. We are seeing that at a number of institutions within the HBCU sector, when across higher education, the story is much different. You are seeing the narrative being that enrollments have declined and plummeted. And so what our HBCUs have been able to do is to lean into the assets. What are our institutions uniquely positioned to provide our students, particularly at a time when we are battling two pandemics? On the one hand, COVID-19, but on the other, this racial reckoning that our country is contending with in a way that we haven't for decades. And so many students are choosing our institutions as their first choice institution because they know that that is not only the place where they are going to get a world-class education, Dr. Morris, but where they are going to receive that education in an environment that is going to support them and equip them to thrive once they leave that institution. And so policy, of course, certainly plays a role in all of this. And Dr. Lomax, I don't know if you want me to speak to that now, or if you want to come back to how we think about the important role of policy relative to our HBCUs.
We're going to go into that, but I'm going to ask you to respond. We're going to tease policy,
Okay.
but there's one other question I do want to ask, and I'd like you to respond first. So looking into the near term, you've got your crystal ball at Lumina, so I'm going to ask you to look into it. What signals and signs do you see, and how do you interpret the potential impact of the Biden-Harris administration, given their $1.9 trillion stimulus, not just, and that does include a $2.9 billion set aside for HBCUs and minority serving institutions? Are there any signs or signals? And then I want to ask Dr. Morris and Dr. Martin to tell us what signs and signals they're seeing.
Yes, I certainly do see a couple of signs, and I don't think it is premature to read into them. When you examine the key pillars of the Biden-Harris's administration's policy priorities, you see a few things that are front and center that speak to the very nature of HBCUs. First among them is a commitment to racial equity. And already we've heard both the president and vice president speak more about racial equity perhaps than any other administration, very pointedly and in a pronounced way about the importance of racial equity to the work that they will continue to do over the next 4 years. You also see as a pillar of the administration an economic recovery as it relates to the COVID pandemic, jobs that are tied to the in-demand labor market. And as you think about the role that HBCUs have played in well-equipping our students to go into those jobs and to be successful in those jobs, and you partner that with the infusion of funding that will allow our institutions to have the technological platforms and the data infrastructure, I think that HBCUs are well positioned to play a very central role as this administration begins to play out its priorities. And I don't think that we can underestimate the role that having one of our graduates as the vice president, being the incredible ambassador. She is not shy about speaking to the role that her HBCU played in her leadership trajectory. And so how can we harness that as all of these other positive things are happening in that institution, at our institutions? How can we harness that energy and leverage it in service of our students?
Yes. So Dr. Morris, what signs and signals do you see in the Tuskegee crystal ball for the Biden-Harris administration?
Well, I have to say this, it's not the question yet, but I have to say, leadership, number one, because the public has a tendency to follow the leader in whatever direction that they are going. And I see that with this administration. I see transparency. You know what's coming out, and you know the nature of it. And you have integrity in this administration by virtue of both the president and the vice president having experienced a great education and move forward to other things in their lives. And so all of that plays into the picture when we talk about what they are doing for the HBCUs. They understand what's needed at the HBCUs. They know why we have HBCUs. There's no question. And it's not that HBCUs have to as our previous administration said, have to pull them out. We don't need pulling out. We need enhancing and encouraging and funding and moving forward to a structure where we are not considered those institutions, because we are a part of the American educational system. And so I believe that we are moving in that direction, and I think that it's going to have a positive influence on all of us.
So I'm sure you use an AI, not a crystal ball, to figure out what's going to happen in the future. So why don't you tell me what you're thinking about, what the Aggies are thinking about over there at A&T, Dr. Martin?
Great question. And, in conversations with our board and our leadership team on our campus and involvement in our constituency, we see the Biden-Harris leadership team framing a very bold and aggressive agenda that reframes a conversation for the United States as being the global leader across a variety of fronts. The focus on climate change and cybersecurity and other related matters of critical importance to our nation as a whole, rebuilding our infrastructure, importance of education and health, and addressing disparities across a variety of fronts. We see those as areas of leadership with very broad-based conversation and ultimately significant investments that will occur in partnership with Congress. Now, what we derive from that conversation are conversations we must have on our campus, so that we are defining where are the areas of opportunity for our university to invest in new programs, new faculty hiring, research, and infrastructure building for our university, so that these investments derive benefits for our university in a very strategic way in the long term. We see ourselves as developing the investments, again, that we must make. We talk about impact of our university, the role we play in economic impact of our community and our region, our state, graduating graduates with the skills they need in those critical areas that are going to be absolutely significant for the future of our state and our nation as a whole. And that's where we see the substantive conversations occurring, and we derive great benefit from these discussions. And you will see from these discussions a directive that we will frame for our board, and actions we'll take that take full advantage of what we characterize as investments in education in the nation from the Biden-Harris leadership and Congress's strategic investments that we must use that continue to leverage our university in a very, very different, much more competitive posture as we look to the future. So we're excited and enthused, we're optimistic, but there's a heck of a lot of work that needs to be done as we look to the future.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat a little bit because I'm going to ask you a question I didn't plan for, but this conversation is driving. And I want to start with you, Dr. Howard, and then this will close out our section on the funding. But we do know that there are some big funding plans that the administration has. There's going to probably be a public works bill, and that public works bill will probably do a lot of infrastructure all across the country. Wi-Fi, for example, which we know that Black communities don't have, and it may provide for opportunities to do to actually help people at Tuskegee build some of those new buildings and rehabilitate existing buildings. So that could happen. There could also be jobs money. I think that if they're going to have a public works bill, they're probably going to tie it to employment. But in order for those jobs to really be 21st century jobs, there's going to have to be a lot of upskilling and reskilling of unemployed and underemployed people, many of whom are the family members of our students. And so I would ask you, and then I want to ask the two presidents, the two chancellors here, do you think there is a larger strategic role that HBCUs can play in addressing the upskilling and reskilling of low-skill workers in the Black community, not to get degrees necessarily, but certifications and credentials that will enable them to do 21st century jobs? And do you see that there's a potential as anchors in the communities that they're in for them to be much more intentionally engaged in the place-based kind of economic redevelopment of our rural communities in the case of Tuskegee and our urban communities in the case of North Carolina A&T?
That is such an excellent and timely question. And my short answer is absolutely yes. I mean, as we think about how we are going to position ourselves to rebound from the tremendous job loss of the COVID era, many of those jobs are not coming back. Right? Given some of the technology advances, given the sectors from which we lost most of the jobs, those jobs aren't returning. They are being replaced by new and different jobs. So the question is, what role can and should our HBCUs play in providing the skills, education, and training necessary so that individuals who have been displaced from jobs can get into some of those newly available jobs, and even those who perhaps weren't in a lucrative career before can get on a pathway to doing so. And we know often, Dr. Lomax, those careers require some education beyond high school, but not always a bachelor's degree. We're talking about a certificate, a high quality industry recognized certification. And so the conversations that I've been involved in lately are about how to embed those credentials along the bachelor's degree pathway. So we never want to say to anyone, you shouldn't get a bachelor's degree, you should go this route. But we know that sometimes people have the best of intentions of getting that bachelor's degree, and along the way that doesn't happen. So along the path to a bachelor's degree, could we embed an associate's degree? Could we embed a one-year high quality certificate that would allow that person to go into the workforce and make a really good living? I also think that as an HBCU community, we have to take a good look at the some college, no degree population. There are many individuals who started at our universities, never got the credential, but did leave with the debt. How can we re-enroll those students? There are 36 million such people in the nation. So they bought into the narrative that there was something good about that college degree, but they never got it. What role can our HBCUs play, particularly within the communities in which we sit, of identifying those individuals and giving them a pathway back in to some sort of credential that's going to make a real difference for them and for our communities?
Yes, thank you. What about you, Dr. Morris? You're in rural Macon County, Alabama, and what opportunities might you see to help the folks all around Tuskegee get the skills that they're going to need for the 21st century? Where, oh, by the way, there is a lot of industry in that. There's a lot of car manufacturing and distribution. Have you been thinking, is that a possibility, or some of the other things that Dr. Howard has been suggesting?
We have discussed that. We have not made firm decisions about it, but obviously there is a need for technical support in this new environment and in the one of the strategic plans of our governor in workforce development. So she is pushing that for all of the colleges and universities in Alabama. So that is an opportunity for us to play that role, because there are so many roads and bridges and infrastructure type things that our individuals could buy into. So yes, we have looked at it and talked about it, and we will eventually go into some of those programs that will especially provide certificate programs, because we want our students to proceed on to a bachelor's degree if that opportunity is available to them and they are able to do so. but it's a necessity, to say the least.
What about you, Dr. Martin?
I think Dr. Howard's comments earlier were very much on point. We have a high percentage of former students, not just from our university, but regional universities who've stopped out or dropped out and want to continue their education. Life got in the way, if you will. And so we've made provisions to deliver for the last 5 years, what we call Aggies at the Goal Line program that brings students back into higher education so that they can go on to complete their education. They don't have time for fighting for parking on campus. So we are delivering most of that education through online. High percentage of students are now enrolled in our online return to school initiatives. We have a number of industry partners in our region who want to provide opportunities for their employees to get a certificate, to develop skills. And so some of our highest enrollment growth has occurred in students returning to school or employers who want their employees to get a certificate to enhance skills as opposed to getting a degree. So we have a high percentage of new certificate degree programs that have evolved out of our faculty and our academic programs. We also find that it's critically important that while we offered about 20% of our degree programs online, and we saw enrollment growth in that space, we are absolutely convinced now that our faculty have all been in a fully online virtual mode during the pandemic, they now get it. And so there's a higher percentage of interest now in delivering a significant number of our degree programs online. And so the opportunities post this pandemic are just rich with possibilities and opportunities for our university to continue to evolve itself to a very different place of importance, to being an asset to this community and the region in very significant ways. And we think the levels of conversation that we have to continue to engage in as a strategic land-grant institution, and this is what land-grant institutions do, we have to continue to add value. We have to continue to assist the community in economic growth and prosperity. We're in a minority side of town in our community, and we are very strategically focused on helping to create jobs, bring jobs, enhance skills in this minority community, which is a very exciting time and opportunity for the work we're doing for our university, quite honestly. We have an economic impact of about $1.5 billion. We expect that's going to continue to grow for our state. We think that's critically important, that we continue to share what role we play and the impact we have, but it also adds to the convincing advocacy we have with our state legislature, as well as with Congress, on the important work we do in telling our story about the successes that we're engaged in as well. And so we're excited about what the future brings for HBCUs in general, and certainly for our university in particular.
So let's transition a little bit in this conversation to policy priorities. You know, President Biden has pledged to take steps to rectify the funding disparities faced by our HBCUs, our TCUs, that is tribal colleges, universities, and minority serving institutions, so that the United States can benefit from their unique strengths. Students at HBCUs would benefit from Biden's proposal to double the Pell Grant, to slash the income-based repayment of loans to 5%, I think it's now 10% of income, and to provide free tuition for students at all community colleges, and in his HBCU plan, he said for all public and private HBCUs as well. And Biden proposes to invest, in addition to that, over $70 billion in these colleges and universities. And so I'm going to ask the two presidents what their wish list looks like, but I'm going to ask you first, Dr. Danette Howard, with the Office of Management and Budgets mandate, and I believe it's also the domestic policy folks run by Susan Rice, that and the entire White House, to look at every policy proposal through the lens of equity. First of all, what does that mean? What does equity mean? Because everybody uses equity. I'm not sure everybody's talking about the same thing. And then also, what policies do you think are ripe for re-examination with respect to HBCUs?
So I'll start first by addressing your question about equity, because it is now becomes such an overused term that it means everything, and at the same time, it could not mean anything. So we are very specific around how we define equity, and that is that equity will be achieved when outcomes cannot be determined or predicted by one's race or ethnicity. That's when we will know that we have achieved equity. And we partner a discussion around equity with one around justice, which is intentionality around dismantling the systems that have led to the inequitable outcomes. And so for me, there's real promise that a commitment has been made to examine every single policy through an equity lens. So as we think about, for example, the increase in the Pell Grant, we know that over the last several decades, the purchasing power of the Pell Grant has decreased considerably. You know, I hear stories all the time. It wasn't during my time, but I do hear stories of when, you know, if you were a Pell Grant student and you worked during the summer, you could pay your tuition, right? You didn't have to take on a lot of additional debt. We know that that certainly isn't the case today. But if the Pell Grant were increased considerably, or if the Pell Grant were doubled, as I've heard some conversations speak to, that would have a significant impact on our HBCUs. Now, the data suggests that over 70% of students who attend HBCUs come from low-income families, therefore are perhaps eligible for the Pell Grant. So if the Pell Grant were increased considerably, our students wouldn't have as hard a time paying for college. Perhaps we would have more students who are persisting all the way through and not having to stop out and drop out. So that is one example. There's also been conversations about debt forgiveness. We know that so many of our students have taken on considerable debt, and much more than their peers from other groups in order to fund their education. What would some level of equitable debt forgiveness look like? And I think that even as we go back to technology, some of the stories we've been hearing of late are about the absolute necessity of high-speed broadband internet access, particularly during this time of COVID, but we expect for that to continue. And so how are we thinking about high-speed broadband as an essential commodity, just like we think about electricity because we need it to work and live? And we know that there have been some policies put in place around the emergency broadband benefit, but are we thinking about that through an equity lens? And specifically, are there ways that we can contribute to the conversation as we think specifically about our HBCU students? But I do think that there is a lot to be excited and optimistic about, Dr. Lomax, about the way that the administration is approaching these conversations thus far.
Thank you very much. Dr. Morris, of those policy proposals that are on the table from Biden-Harris, which one really seems to capture the attention of you all in Tuskegee?
Well, actually, it is the Pell Grant, of course, because the majority of our students are Pell Grant eligible. And when we talk about students who come, they either have to come a semester, work a semester, come again. And so that kind of eliminates that forward growth in education, because they may stop out and decide, well, why do I need to go back? And we want all of our students at least to have a degree in hand once they leave the university. Also talking about the level of debt, because if our students have to borrow the resources, then they are already way behind in terms of economics and economic development when they graduate from the university, because they have so much debt and they have to repay all of these loans that they have received, especially if you have an additional year that you need to complete your requirements for graduation and get one of those private loans with a high interest rate. So it's great for Tuskegee University and for the environment in terms of economic development as well.
Dr. Martin, you got a favorite on that list?
There are probably a couple areas that are strategically important to our university. Obviously, the Pell Grant funding support, as well as the student support for enhancing retention graduation rates, student success. Those two go hand in hand in my mind. But the important part of the Pell Grant doubling, if you will, not only does it go to help keep students in school, because all HBCUs have a high percentage of low-income students who qualify for Pell Grant. So it helps keep students in school and help them move toward graduation in a more timely fashion. But we have a first share of institutional dollars that we support our students as well to help mitigate debt and loan dependence as well. And by doubling the Pell Grants also allows our university to spread our institutional funds, grant funds, to a larger population of students as well, which has a bigger impact on mitigating debt of our graduates when they leave our university, which enables a high percentage of them who want to go on to med school, graduate school, professional schools in general, to be able to do so because not lingering with that debt from undergraduate school, or to begin their careers and begin to make investments strategically in their futures and investing in their community, buying their homes, supporting their families and the like. We think that's strategically and critically important. The other big area that's important to our institution as well, though, is in support of research and research centers and innovation on our campus. We're a doctoral research university. That level of strategic investment helps our university enhance its ability to engage in broader research, supporting our faculty, supporting our graduate students, enhancing our innovation that has a direct impact on economic impact of our communities, creating jobs, attracting jobs, and et cetera, quite honestly. But it also helps our university continue to enhance its broad brand recognition and support. And there are a number of our universities as HBCUs who are on the cusp of moving from R2 research universities to R1 research universities. So this level of strategic investment helps us continue to focus on how we enhance the role we play as economic engines in our communities, in our regions, in our states as well. And so I think this area of investment is also strategically important to the life and role and responsibilities of HBCUs as well.
Wonderful. You know, I want to make a final transition over to the last area that we wanted to cover, and that is really creating a new narrative for HBCUs. The nation's HBCUs are integral to predominantly Black communities and are part of the history of virtually every Black family with a college graduate. Vice President Harris credits her family and her HBCU for shaping who she is. And she says wonderfully in her book, there are two things that shaped who I am today. On the one hand, my mother and my family, and Howard University. No institution has been a brighter beacon for upward mobility for Black Americans than HBCUs. And no institution is currently better positioned to bring about a new age of Black achievement. So I want just a sort of a lightning round with each of you, and then we're going to take some questions from our audience. If you were rewriting the HBCU narrative, and it may be that you've rewritten the institutional narrative that that has this encapsulated in it, how would you tell that story differently than the old deficit model that we've been hearing so often? And so we could just stop people from asking the question, do we still need HBCUs? So I'm going to begin that question with you, Dr. Howard. Is there a new narrative that we need to get out there?
Absolutely, and I think you just spoke to it very well. We need to stop talking about all of the barriers. We begin our conversations with how challenged and challenging our institutions are, and there is a deficit frame that is applied out the gate to our illustrious universities. And we need to just flip that on its side and begin by talking about the opportunities to engage, the possibilities to leverage, and the assets that we need to lean into. Our assets well outweigh any of the challenges or any of the deficits that many begin the conversations about our institutions with.
Thank you. Dr. Morris.
First of all, we have to define our institutions ourselves rather than letting others define it for us. And then we have our graduates tell our story. We have graduates who are successful, who are doing great things out there that is not mentioned by other people. And then we need to continue to graduate and prepare quality students for the workforce and to serve our society.
Wonderful. Dr. Martin, you're going to get the last word on the new narrative.
Well, I think that the crux of this conversation is something my board chair continues to drill into my leadership team and me is we must tell our story. We have all kinds of wonderful and exciting successes among our faculty and their research and innovations. New programs are emerging, partnerships we're creating, graduates who are distinguishing themselves in very significant ways. And one of the areas where we have not done as well as we should has been in telling our story. And I think that's been shared as part of the comments earlier. And so we are much more, as I use the phrase, unapologetically telling our story, so that people know the contributions we're making, the successes of our graduates. And as Dr. Morris has suggested, we have to stop letting other people tell our story. We have to tell our story. And then telling that story also feeds into households of children whom we want on our campus. And so we have to market our university, tell our story, and we also have to continue to be relevant and focusing on where the puck is, as Gretzky has always said. One of the reasons he has been so successful, he's always skated where the puck was. We've got to keep skating to where the opportunities are and continue to take full advantage of those opportunities where we are delivering quality education, research, and engagement in our communities. And so from my perspective, there are tremendous opportunities for us and our universities.
Well, I think Wayne Gretzky was actually going where the puck's going. Puck is, he thinks it's going to go, not where it, but I get you. You got to be proactive, not reactive. Now, I think we're going to have time for one great question, and it's the question is from an HBCU alum. So one of the many rewarding events I found was the human interaction and engagement, otherwise known as that HBCU experience. It was discussed how North Carolina A&T leveraged additional funding to improve the technological infrastructure. Could you please elaborate on how you are providing the HBCU experience by leveraging the stimulus from the current administration? I'm just going to tell you, I want to just say one thing about the A&T Aggie experience. If you are in Atlanta, when the Aggies are playing a football game, you are going to experience the HBCU experience from the Aggie point of view because they take over the city. So I'm going to let you start because there must be something cooking in Greensboro at A&T. So would you tell me what it is that is so unique about A&T?
You know, it's interesting that our system does a survey every 2 years of alumni. And our alumni had the highest percentage of individuals who indicated if they had to do all over again, they would go to A&T again for educational experience. And I think that's framed in the high level of educational investments in quality degree programs, faculty who get to know our students, engage in them, demand the best of them, and the variety of experiences through social engagement, friendship building, and enabling each and every one of our students to recognize that we are here to help them not fail. Our desire is to help them succeed, quite honestly. So there is a demand that's reflected in Vice President Harris's comments as well in their Howard experience. But we also are very intentional about saying to our students that we want to get to know you and want to know what your ambitions, aspirations are. But at the end of the day, our responsibility is to demand the best of you. No whining, no complaining, no exceptions. Join us as we seek to help you realize those high aspirations you have. And I think we do that exceedingly well.
So we've got 1 minute to hear from you, Dr. Morris, and then I'm afraid we don't have another minute. I'm gonna have to turn this back over to our host.
Yeah.
Dr. Morris, what's the Tuskegee secret potion?
If you talk to any alum from Tuskegee University, they will tell you there is nothing like that Tuskegee experience. And then, of course, if you want to really find out, come to homecoming when we have 40,000 more people on the campus just taking in the Tuskegee experience, as they call it, and all of the elements of a very good homecoming weekend. But our students are nourished from the time they get there to the time they leave, and they have opportunities for great internships along the way so that it helps them to prepare for work after Tuskegee. So we teach them, we nourish them, we counsel them, we punish them sometimes, but that's all in the spirit of helping them to get through and enjoy that Tuskegee experience until they graduate.
All right, so that's it. So I see our host, Betty Florimond. Betty, I'm turning this back over to you. This has been a wonderful opportunity to talk with these extraordinary human beings.
Well, Michael, I just want to make sure that you heard, I got that Tuskegee homecoming invite, and you heard it too. You all heard it. So, so listen, federal funding, policy priorities, defining the new narrative for HBCUs, the digital divide, mental health and well-being, the dual pandemics, workforce. What I hope you all took away from this conversation is that leadership is certainly critical to the future of HBCUs. And we just heard from 4 strong and thoughtful leaders. I'd like to thank UNCF for their impact and their leadership. Dr. Lomax, thank you for moderating our discussion today. I'd like to thank Lumina Foundation for their partnership and their commitment to an informed citizenship. Dr. Howard, thank you for your insights today. Dr. Morris and Dr. Martin, thank you for lending your voices to this conversation today and for the work you do each and every day serving students, faculty, staff, and community. And because it takes a village, Alan, Tiffany, Amanda, Peter, Cecilia, Austin, Todd, and Stacy, thank you for making today possible. And I'm so glad we had this conversation today. The work continues. I'm going to challenge each and every one of you that joined to be part of the solution journey. Thank you for joining us today.